Hey, everybody. Exciting topic here today, talking about the future of software engineering, software delivery, using modern practices and platforms with a true expert in the field. Nick from Harness, how are you?
Doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me on, Evan.
Well, thanks for being here. Really intrigued by the work you're doing. Maybe introduce yourself first and your role at Harness, and how do you describe what you guys do exactly?
Sure. My name is Nick Durkin. I'm a field CTO. I've run everything from product to pre-sales to post-sales, and genuinely, my background comes from the financial services sector, building, highly auditable, highly compliant, highly secure environments. And at Harness, we're the modern software delivery platform. And if you think about it, today, every single chief officer has a platform, whether it be Salesforce or Workday, but our CTOs haven't had one. And really, Harness is
Hmm.
designed to be that platform for the CTO.
Well, that's an interesting mission. I'm sure there are lots of CTOs watching with interest. So tell us about the landscape. What are some of the challenges and issues around running a modern developer team in terms of productivity, security? I mean, what maybe that plays into the genesis story of Harness. How did you guys come into being?
Yeah, I think we came into being, we wanted to solve the hardest part of the software delivery
Hmm.
challenge. And to us, we saw that as artifact to customer, so the continuous delivery side.
Hmm.
Once we solved that and we became truly the platform for continuous delivery, then we realized that we needed to carry that same auditability, the same compliance, the same security, the same efficiency from delivery. We need to carry it through the entire software delivery lifecycle. And what's interesting now is that developers, we look at developer experience being one of the most important things today. And it's really because we want to make sure that everything that we do, we're doing efficiently. But also, now that we're leveraging, say, generative AI technology, um, we have to make sure that that true idea of continuous delivery, of automate everything, is there. Because if it isn't, if we haven't automated every step of the way, if we haven't put the guardrails in place, if we haven't made sure that every step we've tested the measures, we're doing the security checks, then how are we going to leverage any code that isn't generated by our own engineers? And so now it's about putting guardrails and boundaries on that entire platform to enhance the efficiency and the velocity. So let's go faster by making sure we have kind of a guarded way to get to production.
Fascinating approach. So, talk about the rise of automation and quality control, for example. So many different aspects to the value chain here, but specifically in quality and delivering, secure and quality code. What's the best practices today with Harness, and how have you changed the approach to SQA and quality when it comes to developer, enablement?
Sure. I think everyone starts their software delivery journey trying to go fast,
Hmm.
right? And so we use our CI tool, we extend it with a whole bunch of open source things, and that's quote unquote our platform. The problem is the two things you kind of brought up, which is okay, what about quality and what about security? And those tend to be afterthoughts past going
Mm.
fast. So those become secondary to velocity. And that's where I think most folks actually end up contacting Harness is that's the hard part. The hard part is securing it. The hard part is creating those easy to use paths that are governed, that are secure, that are auditable, but more importantly, that make sure that our quality is of the utmost. So that if we are failing, we're getting back to where we were before we started without writing code. But more importantly, we're delivering better code, more resilient code, and we're doing it with those guardrails. And so our approach has been just that. If you use a platform from the beginning that has all of those things built in, that makes it very easy for people to do the right thing and makes it hard for them to do the wrong thing. Now, when you build for velocity, you know you have the security in place, you know you have the quality checks in place, and you can prevent anything getting into production that hasn't met all of those requirements.
I love that. And talk about your approach to shift left, the idea of starting earlier in the process with a focus on security. What does that mean in real terms today, and what's your philosophy there?
I think shift left is one of those terms that's been thrown around quite a bit. And I think most people actually shift the workload left. And I think
Mm.
that's the wrong approach. The goal is not to go, hey, shove security on the developers, on the engineers. It's not to go and add cost to a burden that they have to hold. In fact, what it should be is shifting the information left. So let's make sure the people that we trust to deliver software are actually getting the information that they need when it's valuable. So, to that point, we should know right now all of the security vulnerabilities that we have. I should know if I've introduced a brand new one, and I should know how to prioritize them. And if
Mm,
I'm not doing that in real time, I've got a problem. Same thing comes with cost, right? Our most valuable assets are engineers, our people. And what's interesting is we trust them with everything, but yet they get cost information 30 days late. If we
mm,
provide people the information, if we shift all the security information, the cost information, we shift it left, they will make the right decision by default because that's what they want to do. They want to help the company. But if we don't give them the information, I can tell you what they can't make decisions on. And I think that's the problem is that by segmenting this all and by giving it to specific silos as opposed to making that information available, that's where we struggle. And so it's really about shifting the information left, not the workload.
well, great approach. And of course, it wouldn't be a tech chat if we didn't talk about AI. What's the reality of AI assisted development this year into next year? Hype versus the practical utility that you're seeing out there with customers.
Yeah, I think there's two things to talk about AI and how it's leveraged inside of the entire software delivery lifecycle. One is by, if we look at things like generative code, today those are more like pair programming, and we have to use them in that capacity where we would work together to make sure that one developer using AI and themselves can actually deliver good quality code. The problem that customers are having with that is that now we're seeing infinitely more code, right? I mean, people have stated double, multiples of the
Mm,
amount of code that's coming through. So if we don't have the automated systems to actually handle that code, it is of no benefit to us. Right? If I can't take those updates and I can't take those modifications and I can't take those PRs quickly through the system, that becomes an issue. This was one of the
mm,
things, if you actually look at Citibank, they just published a case study with us where it used to be days that it would take to get that PR into production or even in a place where it could potentially be, in a deployment into production. And now within minutes from PR, it can make its way because all those checks are in place, all of those security steps are in place. And so if it doesn't meet those security needs, if it doesn't meet those quality gates, now you can guard against it. And I think it's important in order to leverage the benefits you would gain from artificial intelligence and code generation. I think you have to have an automation around how it gets to production in order to actually leverage it. Secondly, and I
great.
know it's a long answer, but one of the things that people talk about is, or I guess our standpoint is we want to create artificial intelligence that removes the worst part of someone's job, not the best. Right?
Mm,
No one likes toil of creating policies or pipelines or describing how these things operate. So when we're creating our own intelligence or our artificial intelligence around developer assistance, right? That is all around making sure we're removing the worst part of someone's job.
I love that. Couldn't ask for more. Any advice to companies or teams looking to start using AI in software development? Any advice you might give them?
Yeah, I think in the same way that we started with, continuous delivery and we started going fast first without putting
Mm,
the guardrails in place, I would say this is the time that we have to put the guardrails in place first.
mm,
If you want to leverage that, you have to put those guardrails in place. Make sure that everything is getting the appropriate checks, the tests, the security measures. Um, but then also understand the reason that you hired intelligent developers and intelligent engineers is for that specific piece. And so, them leveraging AI together is a massive benefit if you can put those guardrails in place.
nice. Any other risk? You mentioned a couple big ones. Any other landmines that AI might bring to developers and development, and how to manage them?
Yeah, I think a lot of people are looking at artificial intelligence in that replace idea. And
Hmm.
I genuinely I have a happier side of my theories and I've pushed that for a long time. Right now, AI is more like a professor and we're the scientists. We still have to do all of the testing. And I think in tandem is where we gain benefit. I'm sure at some point when we created the tractor, I'm sure people were a little worried that their jobs were going to go away. And what I actually see is a massive opportunity to allow people to do what they love.
Hmm.
If we can remove with AI, like we do in Harness, if you don't have to write, crazy pipelines, if you don't have to go and create insane policies, because you can ask it in human written word to do it for you, now that's awesome because I'm taking away that horrible part of my job. Something I'm going to adopt and I want to use. And I think this gets back to if you start creating AI to remove the best part of people's jobs, you will actually have the employees themselves revolt. And so I think where we choose to implement it and how we choose to implement it is key.
Brilliant. You talk a lot about developer experience. Are you still developing software? They let you in the code, or are you sort of locked out these days?
So we have created kind of our next generation platform when we started that a few years ago. And I'll be honest, uh, in our first generation of the platform, I had access, and I no longer do. Um, I still have, so interestingly enough, I still have some net COBOL running in
Wow,
production at the
old
banks.
school.
Yep, yep, parsing out all the acidic from the mainframes. So we can go back a little bit, but when we are designing and we're building this, it is with engineers in mind, right? It is designed to make that work life balance infinitely better. Um, and I meant that wholeheartedly. Everything that we designed. So we started designing artificial intelligence in Harness 6.5 years ago. We created what was called continuous verification. So we would think about
Mm,
your logs and your performance metrics like your best engineers would, so you wouldn't have to during a deployment. We carried that on through our test automation. So one of the neat things here is that our intelligent testing now goes, instead of, if I write 50 lines of code, I don't want to run all 9,000 unit tests. Right.
mm.
So Harness actually goes and logically understands what part of the code you've modified, what tests are associated with it, and only runs those. So again, using AI to think about things like your best engineers, we've been doing this to remove the worst part of people's jobs for 6.5 years. Generative AI gives us some new advancements to remove even more of that toil, but that's where
Mm.
our AI is entirely focused. Remove that toil from people.
I love the mention of work-life balance, so rarely discussed. You think it's a badge of honor to be toiling away, as you call it, for hours and evenings. Not really. You must have some really firsthand perspective on that. Is it just going home at dinner time? Is it not having to work over weekends to get software delivered? I mean, that must be rewarding to see in action.
It is, in fact, we had publicly stated one of our customers, NCR, uh, when we asked them, I said, "What was the biggest benefit of Harness?" And looking at all the metrics, all the things, all the cost savings, it wasn't that.
Mm,
We asked them, and it wasn't something we calculated against, and it was we got our nights and weekends back.
mm.
They didn't have to babysit a deployment. They didn't have to. They knew that if Harness deployed something and didn't work, it would automatically get it back to where it was before it started without them writing code. They could deal with it tomorrow. And that little bit of understanding changes the way that you think about your job, right? If you're not on call for those situations, if it isn't this high stress situation every time we're doing something, if you have, if you will, that safety harness in place, it makes your life infinitely easier.
Safety harness. You might need a new branding. Maybe talk to your marketing team. That's a great
Right?
one.
Right?
Speaking of safety, let's talk a little bit more about security, securing the software supply chain. I think like all supply chains, the software side has kind of been so chaotic. What are the issues you've noticed? And maybe talk about chain of custody and other topics I've heard you blog about.
Sure. No, I think, look, a lot of people talk about a bill of materials. It's very similar to what you get when you are manufacturing a car or different physical goods. And the idea is so that if I'm going to recall a few automobiles, I don't want to recall all 7,000 or all 70,000. I want to recall only the ones that had that very specific issue. And similar to that now is with software. But bill of materials isn't enough. Really, what we're looking for more than build of materials is a chain of custody. I want to know from ideation all the way through to production where this came from. I want to know the code that it came from, the third party tools that were used. And then I also, because I want to know where and how, right? I want to know which environments it's touched, how it got there, when it got there. So I can also auto remediate. So if we do have a situation, a log4j type situation, once we actually fix that artifact, because I know everywhere it's been deployed, I know the chain of custody, I know how it's been, I can auto remediate every single artifact that exists without having to go and do massive work. And that's really the difference between just having a build of material attached to an artifact, but knowing where that artifact was, how it got there. That's one of the most important parts, and that's what allows us to auto remediate that for you.
Interesting. And how does this idea of policy as code help secure software as well?
Yeah, I think. A lot of people look at role-based access control as kind of the cure-all for all of this, but the reality is there's difference between policy and roles and access. And one of the things that we found in our first generation of the product is we built it so you could create templates. Let's make it easy for everybody to use the same templates, no big deal. But what ended up happening is, what if I wanted something different? What if I was unique? What if I was a
Hmm.
snowflake and I wanted to create? Well, now I had to open the floodgates again. So instead of creating just templates to give people an easy path, we also wanted to give them the ability to create policy to make sure it was easy for people to do the right thing and hard for them to do the wrong thing. So now you can have an entirely separate team writing policy. Examples might need an approval to go into production. You might have a policy that says if it hasn't been tested in UAT, it can't go to production. You might have a policy that says the person who wrote the code can't deploy the code. And you can make sure that all of your checks and measures, your security checks, your actual tests have all been passed. You can make sure you're running chaos or resiliency tests, and you meet
Hmm.
certain thresholds before it ever gets to production. And now having that policy in place, what it's doing is actually giving teams the same rule book, right? They're now playing the same sport. The way I put it akin to is, we've told everybody they've been playing football. The problem is most of the world's been playing football the way they describe it. A few of us have been playing American football, and then we got the Aussies playing what they play. The problem is the rules aren't the same, and so we don't attach it the same way. But if we actually put policy in place, now we've made it very easy for everyone to follow the exact same rules, and you know why it's not going to work. You're alerted right away, making sure that it makes it easy again to do the right things and hard to do the wrong things.
Brilliant approach. So you guys are out and about in the industry all the time. You were at reInvent just the other week. What are you looking forward to the next few weeks, month or two? Any trips, travel, events at top of mind you can share?
Absolutely. So one of the things we do, we started a collective called Engineering X, so
Mm.
engineeringx.org. And it's actually, again, it's not necessarily harness related. It's grabbing industry leaders from across the globe to really determine what good looks like when it comes to engineering. Right? What are those measures that we want to hold ourselves up to? And it's, again, it's part of the collective. So we're having a few of those in Boston, in New York, in California in the next few months. And then, of course, we're looking to do some interesting things really around our DevSecOps as well as our FinOps areas. And of course, always love the Amazon events, love the Google events, love the Linux Foundation events. So those are always on our roadmap.
Fantastic. Well, I'm sure I'll see you around the campus at one of these events at some point. I see guitar in the background. Is that how you unplug? Disconnect? I take it.
I do. My sons are actually in a band, and every
Oh,
once
good
in a
for
while,
them.
their bassist doesn't show up, and so I literally have to pick up the bass and play for them. They're the dueling Durkins, but they're young and they're kind of early in their band.
That's hilarious. So fun. Well, thanks so much for just sharing just some great insights and yeah, it's an amazing opportunity that you and the team are enabling. So well done. And reach out everyone to Harness. They're doing great work and have very active social media handles you should be following. Well, thanks so much, Nick, and great chatting.
Evan, thank you so much for having us on, and if you ever want to chat again, let us know.